Hey everyone, this video will be about the turn manager in the advanced turn-based tile toolkit and how turn order is handled. Now, if you have not seen it already, I recommend watching the video about the game mode and the first frame of gameplay, since this video kind of picks up at one of the points which that video did not cover and goes into it in more detail. So we're going to look into the turn manager, which is located in Content, Advanced Turn-Based Tile Toolkit, and Core. So to start off, I'm going to cover in a bit more detail something that was covered briefly in the game mode video. So here is the Initialize event. This is, if you recall, the event that is called at the very start of the game. In here we can see that we sort these objects in initiative order. So first we get all actors with an interface. So this means that Unreal Engine looks through every actor placed in our viewport and it checks which of these implement the BPI initiative interface. This is different from earlier versions of the toolkit in which only units were added to initiative. In this case, you can add this interface to any actor and it will be added to the initiative array. So for those of you who are not used to working with interfaces, this is a very useful part of an Unreal Engine, and you can see in the class settings of any actor you can add interfaces, and interfaces are essentially shared groups of functions that can be defined differently by different actors. So here in BP unit, for instance, we can see that activate actor is defined in one way, and also other interface functions such as get initiative is used by then simply getting the initiative value and returning it. And this can be defined in different ways for different actors. In a later video I will be showing how we can add a new sort of actor that implements this initiative interface and show how to work with it. But for the current video I'm just going to show how it works by default for the current setup. So let's return then to the turn manager. Here we are. So first it gets all the actors that implement this interface and then it sorts them. So let's look into this function. At the start of this function it gets all of these actors, it creates a local array of these just for organization, and then it shuffles them to make sure that they're loop through truly randomly. If they are not shuffled, then this array is going to be ordered like semi-randomly based on, or apparently semi-randomly based on when the actors were last manipulated and the viewport and stuff like that, and that's things that's difficult to control. So instead I shuffle it to keep this completely random to begin with. Then we loop through this, and for each of these actors we get their initiative, and we do this using the interface function that I was talking about earlier. So now that we have implemented, or we've added an interface, we can always call this get initiative function, interface function, from any actor. Now if it implements this interface, then great, it looks at the definition that that particular actor has of that function and hopefully returns an appropriate value if we have implemented it correctly. If it does not implement this interface, then it will simply continue and nothing will happen, and this is a less expensive operation than casting, and it has the flexibility of that you can then have it on multiple different kinds of actors and implemented in different ways. So we get the initiative for each of these actors. By default this is just going to be basically all of these actors are going to be of the type BP unit, except for the turn manager itself, which we actually also add to the initiative array in order to keep track of what the current turn is. So we get these local actors, we get their initiative, and then we check this local sorted objects array. This is currently empty, so when we first get here, we just go to complete it immediately. We enter this gate, which does not start closed, and we add this unit or this actor to the local sorted objects. So this is the first one that is added. So now this is an array with a length of 1. Then we go to the next actor. We get its initiative. We look at the local sorted objects. At the moment, this is the actor we added last. It then gets the initiative of this actor, compares it to the initiative of the actor we're currently checking. Now, if the initiative of the actor we looked at last is lower than the initiative of the new one, then we want this new unit to be before this older one in initiative, right? So that means we want to have it earlier in the initiative order array, because the initiative order array starts at 0. Whatever unit is at index 0 will be the unit that is currently active, or is at least next to be activated if there are no current active actor. So therefore we insert, so we loop through all of the actors we have currently added to this array until we find one that has a lower initiative value than the current one, and then we insert this new actor into that place in the array. And as we keep doing this, we will end up with an array that is sorted with the actor that had the highest initiative value at index 0 and the one that had the lowest value at the last index of the array, and then sorted appropriately from 0 to the last index. That was quite a convoluted way to explain a sorting algorithm, but that's basically how it works. So that's the sorting. So this happens at the start of the game. So now we're going to jump down to begin actor turn. So if you want to see when this is first called, well, I covered this more in the game mode tutorial, but you can see here, and when the start match event is called, that's when we begin the turn of the first actor in initiative. And what happens here? So first we check, is the actor that we're trying to activate actually valid? So if not, we don't want to activate it, and we wait until the begin actor turn event is called for an actor that is valid. So then we check, is the active actor, so the actor that was active this last turn before we are activating a new one, is that valid? And do we input that we want to first end the turn of this active actor before we start the turn of the new actor? So do we want to call all the end turn events, basically? So this, if this is the case, then of course we first want to end the turn of the active actor. I'm going to revisit this end turn event a bit later. And we check also auto next turn, which means that right after the turn is ended for this actor, we then run the begin actor turn event again. And at that point there should be no valid active actor, because this reference is set to nothing as part of the end turn event. That means that we will continue. Then we check, is the game over? So this can be set whenever your game over condition is reached, which can be anything for your game. By default, this happens when a unit dies. It checks if it is the last unit, or after it dies, does only one faction remain in the game? If so, we set game over to true. That's the default. So if the game is over, we don't want to start the turn of this next unit. We instead want to find and display the game over text. But if the game is not over, then we want to set the active actor to this particular actor, and this is set with a notify. That means that when this is set, it calls a specific function, a replicated function to be more precise. Let's see, so this is onRep active actor. This is a function that simply checks the active actor and checks if it is of the unit class. If so, then we set the active unit reference to the same thing as the active actor reference. If it is not a unit, then we set this active unit reference to empty. So this, we have a separate reference for an active actor and an active unit to more easily access variables contained in the unit blueprint when the current active actor is an active unit, which by default will be almost every turn. After the active actor has been set, then we run a sequence here. We check with the grid manager, are we using an initiative bar? If so, then we run this action to update the initiative bar. This is an action which is handled by the turn manager itself. If you don't know what an action is, then look at my videos about the action system. So, but to briefly describe what it is, so the action queue is then an array of various things that we want to activate in sequence and animate to the player, which is going separately of the game logic. But look at my video on that to understand more about what that is about. So after this, we are waiting for ongoing actions. So if any actions are being played, any of these animated actions in the queue, we want to wait with starting a new turn until all of those have ended. After all of the ongoing actions have ended, then we queue a new action. This is the store turn info action, which is also called by self, which means that we can find it up in animate action here. And here we have the store turn info, which calls all of these nodes, and what they do is set, okay, because we have now set the active actor here, so the server knows this is the active actor, and since it is a notify, then it is replicated, and the clients also know what the active actor is. However, since what unit is currently active on the server, that the server might be a bit further along than what the client is actually seeing, because let's say we are asking a unit to move to a specific tile. Now, for the server, the moment we click, then the unit has moved there, and maybe its turn ends because it has no more action points, and then we activate the next unit. But however, for the clients and for those who are watching the movement unfold, we don't want the client to see a new unit as being the active unit while the previous unit is still moving. We want this to be marked as the current active unit with the active unit marker and all of that stuff. So therefore, we want to wait until all actions have ended before we get the active actor, and we send this as an action to the client, which sets this as a variable, so we know which actor is currently should be displayed to the player as the active unit. I hope that was understandable, and it will hopefully make sense if you also watch the action queue tutorial or the action system tutorial. So that's what happens here, and after this has been queued, then we activate the active actor, which takes us to nothing, of course, because this is also an interface function. So whatever happens here, that depends on how the actor that is activating this event defines this particular function, interface function, and this will in almost all cases be unit, except for the first turn, for the first actor activated of each turn. So since, if we look at the turn manager, we can see that it actually implements the BPI initiative interface itself. And if we look at how it implements it in the interface get initiative, we can see that it returns an extremely high value. So it will generally always be the first, or it should always be the first actor that is activated. So therefore, we should be able to find, as I've added here, the activate actor event, which is its implementation of this interface function. And what happens when the turn manager is activated is that it sets the current turn, it increments the current turn, so we are one turn later, and then it ends its turn. So that's all it does. It just keeps track of what is the current turn. And then it ends its turn, which means that it runs the end turn function, which ends up back at the begin actor turn. Like I said, I will be returning to this end turn function a bit later. So, but generally, this active actor, at least by default, is going to be a unit. So we should look at how the BP unit blueprint implements the activate actor interface function. So here is the implementation of activate actor within BP unit. So it starts with removing itself from the big unit array. This does nothing if it is not a big unit, and you don't have to bother with this unless you are using multi-tile big units in your game. So what it essentially does though is to remove all references to itself and change the big unit array on the tiles surrounding this unit at the start of the turn of this unit, so that it will not be blocking itself essentially as it is moving through the tiles that surround it. I will go into this in more detail when I cover big units in a later video. Then it checks if this unit implements the ability system. This is something I will also cover more in another video, but the ability system is something that makes it so that it's easy for a unit to have multiple different abilities that it can select and choose from. So this is useful for the sorts of games where you have maybe a bar of different abilities that you can choose from, or you have the artificial intelligence have multiple different options of stuff that it can do on any turn. But I will cover that a bit later. But to describe it briefly here, if this is valid, then we want to reduce the cooldowns of any abilities that are currently on cooldown, and then we end or we run on turn start any status effects that are currently affecting this unit. So if it is poison, for instance, we would want to damage it because it has that status effect, or other things like that. So I will be speaking more about status effects also in another video, but the basic units do not implement this, so we don't have to bother too much with it for this video. And after this we reactivate this actor. So this is this is a different kind of interface function. So you have one for activating the actor, which is thought to be something that you, or was designed to be something that you call the first time this unit is activated on a turn, while reactivate is something that, okay, you've activated this unit once, then maybe you move somewhere and then the unit is reactivated. Now often we don't want to run all the same stuff when a unit is reactivated as when it is first activated, which is, well, the case here, since you don't want to reduce the cooldowns of all abilities for this unit every time you move somewhere. You just want to do that the first time, so that's why this is split into two. So after the event actor, so this is activated, you can see that this is right down here. So this is the next thing that happens. When reactivating, we check, does this unit currently have more than 0 action points? If it does not, then we simply end this unit's turn and we automatically activate the next unit instead. But if we do have more than 0 action points, then this means that it's possible for this unit to do different sorts of actions. Therefore we queue the select action from self. So this is, let's see, an animate action event. So if we go to the switch here, which is, and we find select, which is this one, then we have animate select, which calls the player pawn, which is the grid camera, and calls an interface event for this camera to follow this actor. So this means that whenever a unit is activated or reactivated, we tell the camera to focus on this unit. That's what happens here. Then again, we check for the ability system. So if there is no ability system, then we want to find what is the default ability for this unit, and then we activate that ability. So if that default ability is, say, a move ability, then this will activate this ability and show all the tiles that can be moved to around the unit, for instance. And then also tell this ability system that this is now the active ability, and if we hover the mouse or click, then we will be interacting with the functionality that is contained within the movement ability. I will be covering what happens here in more detail in a separate tutorial on the ability system. Now, if the ability system is active, then we activate the unit ability within the ability system, which is a bit more complex than just getting the default ability. And we also update the ability box, which is something which displays all the available abilities this unit has. But this will also be covered on a tutorial on the ability system. So to keep this video about the turn order, all the stuff that happens next is handled between, well, if it's a player unit, it's between the player controller, which handles input to abilities, and the abilities that are being activated. If it's the AI, then it's handled by the abilities themselves, which handle all the artificial intelligence along with the ability system. But eventually this unit is going to be reactivated when it is out of action points, since it has done a lot of actions, or it decides to end its turn or something like that. And at that point this will be called, and this is going to be 0. When this happens, we call the end turn event in the turn manager. So let's look at this event finally. So we have a few inputs here as well. We have the auto next turn input, which I spoke about earlier, which is after we have ended the turn of the current unit or the active actor, do we automatically activate whatever is next in initiative order. We also have move to initiative slot, where we can specify where in initiative we want to move the actor we are now ending the turn of. We can also, this is actually not used anymore here, so this might be removed when you're seeing this video. And also we have this, do we want to use a delay on ending its turn? So this is basically to make the switch between units feel a bit less hectic, and this is true by default for all of the end turn events, but for some games you might not want to use this. But let's go through it one node at a time. So first we have this sequence, so we run all of this stuff first. I'll just skip to the second step of the sequence here, just so after we've run all of this stuff which ends the unit's turn, we check, do we want to have an auto next turn? If yes, then we begin the actor turn of whatever unit is now at initiative order index 0. But let's look through this. So first we want to use a delay. If yes, then we have a delay. This is actually not a real sort of delay in the sense that we are actually waiting with all the stuff that is done server side. This is just a visual delay, for the clients handled by the action system. After this we check, is the active actor valid? So if the active actor is not valid, then there is really nothing to end the turn of, so we just halt here and continue here. If the active actor is valid, then we check the active actor is the active owner, or we get the player controller that controls this particular active actor, and then we deactivate the ability the current active ability for this player. So almost all interaction with the grid and with the game for players is handled by abilities, which will be covered in the ability system tutorial. So when you are ending the turn of an actor, generally an ability will still be active. So we want to make sure that this ability is deactivated, so that after the turn of an actor ends, the player, or you cannot still move or interact or whatever with the previous actor because its ability is still active. So we make sure that that ability is deactivated. It is not a specific ability, so we just want to deactivate whatever ability is currently active. Then we move this actor, which we just ended the turn of, in initiative, and this is based on this move to initiative slot value. And if we enter this function, we can see that we have a few different options here that we're switching on this enum. So if we want to move it to the end of initiative, this is kind of the default. Then we move this actor to the last index of the initiative order. That means that this actor will not be activated again until all other actors have acted before it. But we have a few other options. So we can have first, if we just want this unit to be the first one in initiative and actually activate it again, or it can be the second in initiative, so we want to jump to the whatever unit is after it, but after the next unit is done, then we want to go back to this one. Last in faction, this means that we're going to look through the faction variable of all the actors in initiative until we find one of a different faction, and then we want to insert this actor before that actor. So this is what I use for switching between units by clicking on another unit. Then we want to reactivate this actor at some point, but we want to wait until all the other units of that faction have been activated. Then we have remove. This means that, well, after this actor has ended its turn, we want to remove it from the initiative order, so it's not going to be activated again unless we manually add it back into the initiative order. This is useful for things you just want to be one-off stuff that happens. You don't want to activate it again and again every turn. And then you have the first in next round, which looks through the initiative order until it finds a reference to the turn manager, which indicates that that is the point in the initiative order in which a new turn starts, and we enter this actor at that point. So those are a few different options. Generally, you're just going to use the end input probably, but you have a lot of different options to achieve various effects. So after moving it in initiative, we make sure that the initiative order is updated to whatever has been sorted in here. Then we check if this actor will act this turn. Now, what does this mean? Well, it essentially means that it looks at the active actor, which is still the one that we're ending the turn of, and then it checks, okay, on the current turn, is this actor going to be activated again? So this basically means in the initiative order, is this actor before or after the reference to the turn manager? And this will of course depend on whatever input you have here to the move actor in initiative function. So generally this will not be true. If we look through it here, it finds a reference to itself or the turn manager and checks if it finds that reference before it finds a reference to this current actor. So whether or not this is true, we call the deactivate actor interface function on the active actor. But if we only set the end turn boolean to true if this actor will not act again this turn. So this means that we can control some things. So for instance, if we are just switching from one unit to another unit, so that we're shuffling this unit in initiative, but we don't really want to end its turn, then we can specify that here. And finally, we set the active actor reference to empty here. So let's look at the deactivate actor interface function and how that is implemented for BP unit. So you can see here, when we are deactivating it, first we have again the modify big unit array by unit. So we have to briefly explain. So this is the counterpoint to this one basically. So after we've done with this unit, we want to re-add it back into the big unit array so that other big units cannot overlap the tiles it is standing on. That's all we want to really do if we're not properly ending its turn. If we want to so if we don't want to activate it again basically. Now if we're really ending its turn, so which as we just specified means that this unit is not going to act again until we have a new turn. If so, then we call the refresh unit function, which sets its current action points to its max action points and sets exhausted to false. And this is so this is we really just want to refresh the unit in this way if it's not to act until its next turn. I mean, if it has already moved, say, and used a few action points, then we switch to another unit and then switch back to it. We generally don't want it to have all its action points refreshed again. So this is a way to ensure that that doesn't happen. Then afterwards it checks again, is the ability system valid? So again, we will revisit the ability system later, but in this case it then loops through all the status effects currently affecting this unit, and it runs whatever stuff is supposed to happen on turn end for these status effects. Now at this point we go back here as we covered earlier, and we will probably be activating the next actor in initiative, and we go back to begin actor turn, and it keeps looping like this until the game ends basically. So that's how the turn order functions. Now I thought some of this might be a bit difficult to understand, so I've made a beautiful little thing here to illustrate more visually how all of this works. So this here I am representing the initiative order array, which is called initiative order actors, as all of these comment boxes. So in this case we have 6 different, this is an array of size 6. So this is how it would look then at the start of the game, or really before this. So these are all the actors then, say, we have placed in our viewport, and in addition the turn manager itself, and these have various initiative values. So the turn manager has an initiative value of 1,000,000, so it's going to end up as the first in initiative. And let's say that all of these units have initiative values of 1, and all of these enemy units have initiative values of 0. So all of these will be randomly then placed in these first 3 spots, but they end up like this. So this is in our initial sort units in initiative, or objects in initiative order function, and these will end up here. So this is how we start. Then when begin turn is called at the start of the game, the turn manager's begin turn event is called, and all it does is increment the current turn by 1 from 0 to 1, and then it ends its turn. And when it ends its turn, as we can see here, after it is activated, it ends its turn, and we move it to initiative slot end. And so that means we want to move it to the very end. And what happens then is that all of these other actors move in initiative, at which point this unit is activated. Now this unit is activated, which means that its default ability is activated, and it moves around, it shoots, it lives, it dies, whatever, and at some point it ends its turn, or it doesn't die in this case. Let's see that it lives and it ends its turn. Since this is so if it's out of action points, by default it's going to be moved to the end of initiative. So we move it here, we move everything up, and then it goes to the end. At which point we activate this second player unit. Now let's say that this unit then moves and uses one action point, but it still has an action point left, and then it wants to switch to another unit. So what happens then is that we move this to end of faction, because that's how it is set up by default when we click another unit and switch to another unit of our faction. So that means that it looks through the initiative order array until it finds a unit of a different faction, which it does at index 0, no, at index 2. And what it wants to do then is to insert itself at the index preceding this index, which is index 1, at which point this unit is then popped up to index 0 because it was removed. And then this unit is activated, it plays out its turn, it goes to the end, and this unit is now activated. But since we never, when we end the turn of this unit, we did not select end turn when deactivating it. So therefore, it just has one action point left. It has still used one action point when it is activated, and so on. And if a unit is killed, let's say that it kills this unit here, then the initiative order array is also appropriately resized so that it is filled up like this. And after the turns keep moving on, when we come to the turn manager, it increments the current turn variable by 1, so we know that a new turn has started, at which point you can fire whatever sorts of stuff you want to happen when a new turn starts. So this is the place you would want to add actions for showing your big turn to start text, or whatever specific gameplay you want to have happen at the start of a new turn. Now to look a bit closer at the various options for moving units in initiative, if we just refill this, and let's say that we are at this point. So end of turn, that will be the first thing we covered here, where it is moved down here and all of these are moved up one step. Now first, that means that, well, since it is already first, it's going to be first again. So that is essentially you're activating the same unit again, or actor. For second, that means it will be just moved one step down, so this is going to happen. For last in faction, that's what we looked at earlier. So in this case, the enemy unit is here and the next faction is actually a player, so last in faction means that it's not going to be moved at all, because it looks at the next, okay, then I am already the last in faction. If there were other enemy units here, it would be moved down to be the last in its faction. Remove, that means that after this is done, it's removed from initiative, and well, the array is then resized, so this would happen. And first in next round means that it will look down until it finds the turn manager, and then it wants to insert itself right after the turn manager. So it will be the first actor to be activated when the next round comes along. So those, that's basically most of what there is to say about how turn order, initiative order works in the toolkit. I hope it's for the most part makes sense. If you have any questions, then you can ask in the comments or in the support thread where I can give more in-depth answers, which is linked to in the description of all of my videos.